Hi, my name is Lloyd Chapman. I'm president and founder of the American Small Business League, and I wanted to respond to some accusations from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I appeared on CNBC with their spokesman Giovanni Cortola the other day, and we've released that video on YouTube. I think it's called Lloyd Chapman Spars with U.S. Chamber. You should watch that. So here's some things that I think we should talk about. During the course of the CNBC program, I asked Giovanni Cortola if the Chamber would support legislation to stop the flow of federal small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. And he refused to answer. I asked him the question 3 times and he refused to answer it. And we found out since then, we've done some research here at the American Small Business League, and we found out why the Chamber won't back legislation to simply stop the government from giving small business contracts to Fortune 500 companies. 15 Fortune 500 firms that are represented on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors are receiving federal small business contracts. Big shocker. The U.S. Chamber says 96% of their members are small businesses, but 65% of the board of directors come from Fortune 1000 corporations, primarily Fortune 500 corporations. So as I said in my CNBC piece every day, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce lobbies for and represents Fortune 500 firms. They do not represent small businesses in any way, shape, or form. Now, Giovanni had a question for me that I didn't get a chance to answer. He also put it in his little blog post here today called Business United or Business Divided, What's at Stake? So he's asked me twice why I wouldn't back the SBA grandfathering 5-year recertification policy that the U.S. Chamber backed. I'll tell you why. I spent about 3 years fighting that policy. The policy that Giovanni has acknowledged that the U.S. Chamber has backed will allow Fortune 500 firms to keep getting federal small business contracts through the year 2012. We estimate that during the course of that policy, small businesses will lose about $500 billion in federal small business contracts. That's $100 billion a year for 5 years. So that's why I didn't support it, Giovanni, because the American Small Business League doesn't support policies that allow your board members to continue to receive billions of dollars in federal small business contracts through the year 2012. So let's talk about some other issues here. Giovanni told me I need to get my numbers straight. So we've double checked it here. And so far, $2.7 trillion has been spent by the United States government to stimulate the economy. And less than 1% has gone directly to small businesses. While Giovanni's very proud that he bought a window and small businesses are going to get some money indirectly, I think it'd be nice if the small businesses got money directly. And the best way to do that is with federal law that stipulates that 23% of all federal contracts and subcontracts go to small businesses. And the U.S. Chamber doesn't seem to like that piece of legislation. So another thing that I thought was interesting is I found out that the U.S. Chamber accepted $15 million from AIG, I think it was in 2007, to try to block legislation to regulate the financial industry. Think about that. So I think we all know, or maybe a lot of people realize, that one thing that caused the recession is a lack of regulation of the financial industry. And the U.S. Chamber helped lobby to defeat legislation to regulate the financial industry. That's why AIG gave him $15 million. The other thing I found out is that when members of Congress wouldn't vote for the bailout bill, that the U.S. Chamber threatened them. If you go online and Google a story, I think it was called U.S. Chamber Threatens Lawmakers, you can see how the U.S. Chamber threatened members of Congress that wouldn't vote for the bailout bill. Now, and this is the bailout bill, by the way, that wound up giving only 1% of the $2.7 trillion to the 28 million small businesses where most Americans work that create over 98% of all new jobs. So I've got my numbers straight, Giovanni. What else do we have here? You know, this issue of the diversion of federal small business contracts to large businesses has gone on for 7 years. The first investigation into that issue was based on information that I provided. There have now been around 12 other investigations. And so the U.S. Chamber says that they're small business advocates. The SBA Inspector General referred to the diversion of federal small business contracts to large businesses as one of the largest challenges facing the SBA and the entire federal government today. I challenge anybody to find anything that Giovanni Cortola or anybody at the U.S. Chamber ever wrote demanding a halt to the diversion of federal small business contracts to Fortune 500 corporations. You'll never see it. 7 years, and they've done nothing. What else do we have here? The other thing Giovanni said was he referred to the diversion of federal small business contracts to big companies as a niche issue that only affects a small sliver of the population. Well, on their website, the U.S. Chamber says they have 3 million members. 96% have less than 100 employees, and 5% do business with the federal government. That comes out to 144,000 chamber members that are small businesses doing business with the federal government. Now remember, Giovanni calls it a niche issue that only affects, what did he say, a small sliver of the business community. Well, 144,000 of their dues-paying members are being affected by it. And compare and contrast Giovanni's description of the issue with the SBA Inspector General, who said it's one of the biggest problems facing the entire federal government today. So it's $100 billion that's being pulled from the middle-class economy. And Giovanni calls it a niche issue. I think it affects every man, woman, and child in America. President Bush tried to stimulate the economy with about $116 billion in checks to people. And now President Obama is trying to stimulate the economy with around $100 billion a year in infrastructure spending. So if spending $100 billion a year or giving people $100 billion in checks is supposed to stimulate the economy, then when you pull $100 billion out of the middle class economy, that's going to do the opposite. So I think Giovanni doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. You could probably tell that if you saw the CNBC video. So what else do we have here we can talk to these guys about? They talked about the American Small Business League. He said I was a sham, I think, and that the American Small Business League is a sham. Well, I think the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is a sham. They claim to be represented, to represent small businesses or represent all businesses, and nothing could be further from the truth. They are Fortune 500 lobbyists through and through. Look at what they do, and you can see that. The American Small Business League, let's look at what we've done. So I told Giovanni on the CNBC piece that I focus on representing small businesses that do business with the federal government and government contractors. I've never claimed to do anything other than that. If some journalist asks me my opinion on another subject, I'll be glad to give it to them. But the American Small Business League and Lloyd Chapman works primarily for companies that work with the federal government and government contractors. That's around 400,000 small businesses, at least in America. And again, that affects everybody in the country because it's $100 billion a year. The first investigation into the diversion of federal small business contracts to large businesses was based on information I provided. That story ran in Washington Technology, and Dave Cooper of the GAO acknowledged that in the story. So we've gotten around 15 federal investigations. We've gotten around 400 or 500 stories in the press on this issue, and we've won around 6 federal lawsuits that expose this. And now I'm the only person, I guess, in the country that's ever written a piece of legislation to stop it. So if anybody around here is a sham, I think it's Giovanni Cortola and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce by trying to convince people that they're small business advocates while they're run by Fortune 500 corporations and lobby for Fortune 500 corporations. So is there anything that I missed?
No, I think you hit it.
I think we hit a few things there. So again, I'm Lloyd Chapman, President of the American Small Business League, and thank you.